Hello everyone, student meteorologist Steve Shrenkel here, back with another episode of NWS History with Steve. Now in this episode we're going to be looking at some of the events and details leading up to the civilian signal service years of the National Weather Service. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
As you saw in the last episode, the National Weather Service finally became recognized as an agency in 1870, but under a different name, the Division of Telegrams and Reports for the Benefit of Commerce. While the agency was up and running, research studies were beginning to be conducted at a central office located in Washington, D.C. This early research was mainly based upon topics dealing with meteorological laws and observations. Eventually, civilian professors like Cleveland Abe, who were aided to this research in which they studied atmospheric electricity and thermometry exposure. The agency also grew a huge amount of new field stations from 24 to 284 between 1870 and 1878. These stations eventually observed barometric pressures and their changes, temperature and its 24-hour change, relative humidity, wind velocity, pressure of the wind, amount of clouds, and the state of the current weather. Field stations never saw a dull moment from the beginning. From labor riots, to Indian wars, to extra public service during emergencies like the Chicago Fire of 1871, to even different diseases, these stations were constantly kept on their toes with obstacles that were dealt with. Early forecasts in these stations were focused on 8 large districts that spanned across the entire U.S. With these forecasts continuing through 1873, they were being distributed to thousands of rural post offices for display as farmers' bulletins in front of these offices. In 1874, forecasts were made for 11 districts with 4 weather elements to them. During 1877 to 1878, the chief signal officer described the duties of men enlisted and employed at a field station at that time. These duties included varying observations on the readings of a barometer, thermometer, rain gauge, wind velocity, relative humidity, movement of clouds, and condition of the weather. The Signal Service's early years' success for its first 10 years could be attributed to the chief in charge of it, General Albert J. Meyer. He was a very well-respected man that was recognized for being the father of the Signal Service. He organized the agency in a very effective way and stressed the public service aspect to others that came with being employed by the service. He even had proposals to develop what is known today as the World Meteorological Organization. When General Meyer died in 1880, General William Babcock Hazen took control of the agency. General Hazen's legacy within the service was not as bright as General Meyer's was. The signal agency was rocked by frauds, scandals, and investigations during his time in power. An example of the huge scandal at that time was the Howgate scandal. This involved Captain Henry W. Howgate, the dispersing officer of the Signal Service. He had embezzled up to $237,000 from the U.S. government through the use of fraudulent vouchers. This caused many accusations for the Weather and Signal Service, claiming they aided Howgate, giving the service a negative reputation with the public. Also under General Hazen's administration, the War Department was becoming less enthusiastic about having a weather service. The Signal Service had been completely taken over by weather duties, and should its military services ever be needed, their personnel cannot be spared from their weather duties. Overall, General Hazen's time with the service was filled with turmoil and controversy even after he died in 1887. After he died, General A.W. Greeley was chosen as his successor. Greeley failed to quiet the discord and disharmony with a report on the man in charge of Washington D.C. being too much of a scientist and too little of a weather observer, preventing accurate forecasts. By 1889, General Greeley became convinced that it was too little, too late to reconcile opposing factions within the administration. While he did try to correct the shortcomings of the Weather Service from the past 7 years, it was all too late. In 1889, President Benjamin Harrison recommended the transfer of the National Weather Service to the Department of Agriculture. Congress eventually agreed on October 1, 1890, and the Weather Service was transferred and signed into law by President Harrison. Those in the Corps were honorably discharged. The Weather Service was now recognized as a civilian agency. While the work of the Signal Corps Meteorological Division ended only 20 years after it began, that period was monumental to establishing the foundation of the new Weather Bureau, with the United States already leading the world in providing public weather information, forecasts, and warnings. Through the positives and negatives, the National Weather Service was continuing to evolve at an extremely rapid pace due to one of the important times of history, the civilian years.
Thank you for watching this episode of NWS History with Steve. If you want to see some more great content, be sure to check out our Twitter page at CalUWS, our Facebook page, California University of Pennsylvania Meteorology, our Instagram page, CalUWS, and our YouTube channel, CalU PA Meteorology. Thank you again, and I hope you tune in next time.